Chapter 15. The catastrophe begins. Vajraveer commenced the game moving his first pawn sitting right before the king 2 spaces forward, and then Ulkasur replicated the same move. The war on the board began. Vajraveer moved forward his knight, castling around the king. Next, Ulkasur took out his bishop, resting next to the king, and dragged it to the square on the extreme end. Vajraveer moved a pawn resting before his left rook in order to provide an open room for the rook to advance in his next move. By his pleasing expression, he looked relatively enjoying the game delightfully so far, and so did the spectators. After few crucial moves when board looked balanced with favorable imbalances, getting through several gambits, Ulkasur took the charge to overhaul the game by taking a bishop, a knight, and a couple of pawns from Vajraveer. Vajraveer too, in one of his best wits, managed to pull few pieces away from Ulkasur, including a knight and 3 pawns in few initial moves. The court would rejoice his every triumph, but Ulkasur would curse it beneath his smouldering breaths. Each takeaway would cost you a precious life apiece, king. Keep moving, keep going. He mused as the thoughts whispered in his ears. With each piece taken away, one of the ministers would put a cross above their counter figures in front of the respective numbers vertically on the large thick white sheet, while the other one wrote down the detailed calculations of war horses, camels and elephants, as well as the soldiers to be transferred by both the kingdoms to one another. The sheet perfectly maintained the score as the game moved on. The game reached in the middle anguish of critical shifts. Each move on the board was like a thundered strike, impounding some gains and some benefits thus far. And amid this steep tumult, the two who seemed far more restive about where this game would lead to than anyone else in the viewers were Vishnukarma and Gajradhan. But both were on the farthest 2 different dimensions, one for invulnerability and the other for extermination. Now came the turn when Ulkasur played one of the deadliest tricks he had ever used. He modestly lured the king into capturing his few pieces quite effortlessly, and then turned in with sound sequence of moves to unleash his last deadly move, and capriciously captured his queen. The audience gave a gasp of astonishment, while Vishnukarma sat mutely with a deep look as if he knew it would to occur after a certain point of time. Ulkasur picked up the white sleek piece and brought it close to his face, holding right in front of his vammy eyes, and stared at it for few seconds. Then he slowly shifted his focus on Vajraveer, who appeared to be a little perplexed on such of his act. With a soft little sigh, he looked onto the board again and got to ponder over for his next moves. "I would like to claim my lady, O king," interrupted Ulkasur in his shrewd, screechy voice, restraining Vajraveer to move on with the game. "All transactions are being well recorded. You will surely have your claim. Let us first finish the game," replied Vajraveer in low, calm, but splendidly elevated voice. "This transaction is way more superior to those of minor ones, and crucial too. Hence, should be over and done with, right at this moment," insisted Ulkasur. "I have no purpose to offend the king, but I hope you would agree if you take it as a friend's humble request," he added in a convincing tone to persuade Vajraveer to put up with his will. First a bit on the edge in suspicion of Ulkasur's cryptic ambitions, he seized to the moment thinking whether he should try to fathom his intentions or not, but then breaking the silence and without asking Ulkasur whom he would like to choose to cart off with him from Surishila, he called out for the most charming damsels of his kingdom. Few courtiers went to women's dormitory and requested few maidens to appear in the court as per the order of the king. Some of them were prominent singers, some were grandiose dancers, and some were skilled instrumentalists. Ulkasur waited pretentiously patient since he had to strike his hammer when the iron was the hottest. However, by the time impatience was evidently clear on Gajradhan's face. The elegant ladies entered the court and poised around them as if weaving a strand of glittering gems around the people sitting inside it. The entire court was dazzling with the presence of their illuminating grace and beauty. Looking at them, Ulkasur spoke in one of his atrocious snickers. "I want none of your esteemed fair ladies. You can go back and continue to embellish the royalty." Then, vaguely turning back to Vajraveer, he pronounced, "Remember, my friend, queen taken means carting off with any woman of your choice." He emphasized on any in such a manner that his pernicious intentions started to pour drip by drip. "The women of our choice has already been chosen," Ulkasur declared further, louder enough for the entire audience to listen to his declaration. "Today, in the substratum of the courts of this game, assented by the rulers of the Surishila realm, witnessed by the most reverend dignitaries in the divine vision of Ma Bhadrakali, I, Ulkasur, ask nothing for myself, but for my prized nephew, the hand of your daughter-in-law, Madhavi." All courtiers were frozen to this moment. Gajradhan sneered at the vision of being rejected by the same woman all the time before, but now was geared up by the affirmation of his cunning uncle to avenge his lost esteem. Vajraveer, highly infuriated at Ulkasur's defiled guts, gurgled like a storm sea, condemning his deceitful disguise of being a faithful friend. "Pity on your despicable tricks and your nephew's rotten desires. But I am not that old and weak that I cannot defend the dignity of the woman of my family. I would rather rip you two apart than hearing to such an intentions one more time." The king expeditiously rose from his chair as it finally bursted his patience, emitting fire of fury and revulsion smouldering in his small, narrowed eyes. But just then, Mahamatya, Shri Kripa Hanscharya, came forward to repress the raging fury and reminded King Vajraveer of his stature and kinship with the Vahrana dynasty that would pertain more to being a father of daughter married to the same kingdom, and unfortunately with the same soiled spirit who now had desired for his most virtuous daughter-in-law. He further added that Madhavi was a wise princess who would undertake the circumstances ingeniously, hence decision should be left up to her. Mahamatya's elegant judgment discerned the right situation well from wrong, and hence to keep simply impossible by leaving the final decision on to someone who would never agree to such a reprehensible proposal for her. He sent a minister to Madhavi for asking her opinion about the proposal of Gajradhan and also to give a written note on the sheet of a paper sent along. Disgruntled with Mahamatya's recommendation, Gajradhan whizzed crossly and looked at Ulkasur in stern disagreement. Ulkasur instantly rose to object. "But she has no right to make any decision. She has already been chosen, and that too by the rules. Therefore, she should now be sent with us without any further debate on this verdict." "No verdict can be imposed upon any woman. She has all equal rights to decide for herself. If we send any woman with you against her own will, the curse of goddess Kulkarni would descend on both the kingdoms, leaving them hairless for the next generations. Both the kingdoms would not only suffer for their lifetime, but also would vanish from the golden chapters of history. I don't think you would wish for such occurrences, even if not for you, for the one you adore so dearly. Hence, you should keep your calm and wait till the ultimate conclusion is drawn," spoke Mahamatya in so convincingly firm tone that Ulkasur could utter no single word further to any clarification, but subsided in steep silence now, only to wait for Madhavi to appear in the court. Madhavi listened to the entire incident that had happened in the honorable court of Surishila. She was extremely taken aback at the proclamation of Ulkasur, however needed no exertion to spend on Gajradhan's malignity as she had dealt with it several times before. Moreover, she was also aware of malevolent intentions of two finds. Contrary to inscribe her opinion on any piece of paper, she firmly decided to appear herself in the court instead, not only to stand by her own integrity, but for the honor of the king and her kingdom. When she appeared in the royal court, everything beseemed an estranged cease at the event of her graceful presence. Everybody, numbed at such unpredictable instants, glued motionlessly on their seats. They looked at her with a fixed glare as she proceeded towards the center of the court. With every walking step, she emerged like a rising sun, dipped in its saffron glow, scattering away the stubborn, smudging somber with its unconquerable radiance, no lesser than a living goddess. She stood before the center where game had been positioned and spoke irrefutably. "I defy any decision made in sequel to self-amusement of a mere game crafted on a piece of wood, which in no way is capable of arbitrating my destiny, as well as nobility of any woman in my homeland, or in fact in any kingdom on this earth." Then she looked deep into the eyes of Ulkasur and Gajradhan with a flaming sight, cautioning outright about their rights and interests as far as she was concerned. "Who bestowed you with the right to modify our honor over few futile, groundless rules of a quaint board game? No woman either agreed to or approved of any rules or any conditions linked to the fascination of this delimited amusement. Then how could you pick and decide such like rules on your own will? There are no inscriptions nor any legend to have ever been serviced or evidenced to uphold your proclamations. Then who you think you are I am abided to listen to and take ramble in your depraved shadows? This is not the court of Hastinapur where another Draupadi can be disgraced in front of all the great devout followers of Dharma, where one more time the pride and dignity of the woman can be put to stakes in exchange of few lifeless pieces moving on a stiff board of 64 two-faced squares with a deceitful game conceived by your ill wills. My Lord Krishna has empowered me with the whim to safeguard the honor of woman as well as prestige of my dominion. Thence I need no man as my wall. If you long to behold the same, be the bystander of my audacity on the battlegrounds. I'm sure you must have been a witness to the wisdom written in the Holy Gita, as it is well defined by Sri Krishna as the Lord of Dharma himself. I, the God, construct myself in human form to re-establish Dharma. Whenever there is a decay of righteousness and there is exhalation of unrighteousness, then I myself come forth. When Dharma is offended, the anger defenses itself to re-establish Dharma. The origin of this anger is not fear. This anger is altruistic. This anger is beyond the boundaries of violence and non-violence. It is beyond bravery and cowardice. It is beyond fair and unfair. It is for redefining the right conduct. When this anger expresses itself, the God appears to hold the reins of man's chariot. Hence today in this honorable court of Surishila, where a woman is duly honored with the right to speak for her honor, repute and dignity, I, daughter of great King Baldeva and daughter-in-law of Honorable King Vajravir, bow before the king in my immense gratitude with his consent. Here at this note, King Vajravir nodded in agreement, turned down any rule that appertains to nobility and dignity of a woman. Suppressed by Madhavi's imposing illustrious remarks, Gajradhan upraised furiously and ululated bitterly. If this be a fight, then so be it. I surely long to see you on the grounds to crush your sheer pride. For now neither of you, your king or kingdom, deserves any veneration from any neighboring monarchies for not only going back on the sad words, but also letting the sovereigns get humiliated by a woman. Ulkasur paced closer to Gajradhan, looked first at Madhavi, then at Vajravir, and then, blending in repressive aggression of his nephews, asserted themselves. What he says is true to each and every bit of the unfaltering treaty we apprehended in the beginning of the game, agreeing to stick around the rules. But by the ways, you renounce your own covenant. It shows how vulnerable you are to fit to be a king. Vishnukarma couldn't tolerate such an insult for his king and an old friend. He finally exploded with anger, with no control levitating on his burning force as the final fuel had been added to the fire inside him. You speak of who a ruler is, when you yourself have failed to be even a faithful friend of the ruler himself. You and your treacherous plans have never been hidden from us, but we still waited to fathom the depth of your treason, disloyalty, lying, hypocrisy and deception. But as God bids his time for his own reasons, karma may take its time, but it is inevitable. Hence you too stand all bared and exposed. Now leave before my knight is back and prepares to finish the war before even it started. Leave my land and go cleanse yours, for we certainly wish to meet you there. Before any one of the two demons could speak any further, Vajravir intervened and called Gajradhan a fruitless brute for having no primary ambition but to bank on his uncle's desultory counsels. He then turned to Ulkasur, calling him an immoral evil in a guise of a friend. He then lamented on how he could not read his mean plots ever before, and then raged fully, bawling at the duo, asking them to leave his land instantly. Ulkasur fluttered his stole morsely on his right arm, thrusting it on his bare chest, gripped Gajradhan's wrist in a tight clutch of his crooked fingers, and dragged him along towards the exit of the palace, thereon to leave Surishila immediately without looking back. Vajravir turned towards Madhavi to apologize for his amateurishness. His eyes shifted to the side again and became glazed with a glassy layer of tears. How come I can be so blind toward my own responsibilities? How can I be so ruthless toward the nobility of my own righteous daughter-in-law who has sacrificed all her happiness and all her life for the sanctity of my kingdom? Then he slowly turned back to Madhavi. As he blinked, tears dripped from his eyelids and slid down from his cheeks. How should I ask for your forgiveness, my divine child? He halted and sobbed in his sinking heart and truly revealed his sincere liability for such abrupt and unforeseen circumstances in which he had contributed unknowingly under the influence of an immoral communion. But Madhavi, in her simplest sobriety, calmed down his downhearted spirit and voiced the most enlightening words. O King, O dear Father, what has been done was not per your wish or was in my knowledge, but to the pure knowledge of Lord Krishna. I believe the one who knows well that he is the master to channelize all the acts that were merely performed by the puppets in his hands. For everything belongs to him. that he is the proprietor of all activities and that therefore everything done with an object of genuine kindness has nothing to do with the outcome of those activities, whether righteous or sinful. Madhavi looked straight at the courtiers then. It is wise to be kind, but not to proffer so much kindness to those who can only pay back as hurt and pain in return. Those who create games of vengeance and deceit, those who make their swindling offers in honey-coated words. The kindness must be balanced. Hence, it is both kind and wise to have the forethought to protect those who have done no wrong. Madhavi again turned towards the king. I understand what you did was unconsciously done, and why they acted as they did. I hold nothing upon you, but would request you to compensate your miseries by allowing me to stand by your chariot on the battlefield. This is how Madhavi's splendid intellect overwhelmed the entire atmosphere by bequeathing peace to a tormented soul as well as bearing the conditions to finish her own will. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results onto the Supreme God, is not affected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Bhagavad Gita.